so much for joining us this morning.
Perfect. Kyle Show is going to play an important role as we move through this. Your chat space is a perfect place to communicate both with the network and also with Kyle. Kyle's going to be fielding your questions as we move through this. We want to get to your questions even before the questions that we have for our guest. If you'd rather your questions remain anonymous, just chat Kyle directly. And now, with no further ado, let's introduce our guest. Mr. Jeff Hayes is the president and the CEO of the Myers-Briggs Company, but more importantly, the man is a man of and leader of character. The Myers-Briggs organization is a company that is a force for good, and it's no surprise that Jeff Hayes, as a person, as a leader, is a force for good. I met Jeff roughly 3 years ago at a conference, and there was an instant connection. There was resonance, and I have to tell you, you're probably going to experience it yourself, because he and his organization work worldwide, inspiring leaders, developing teams by helping us understand who we are as people. I'll never forget when I got my first printout of who I was on the MBTI, and I was amazed, I was inspired, and it's helped build an awareness for me as a leader and of course millions of other people. And so I'm truly excited to introduce to you Mr. Jeff Hayes. Jeff Hayes, say hello to our Collaborative Leaders Network.
Hi, thanks so much, Craig. Thanks for that great introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I was excited when Craig asked me to, said, would you be willing to join our huddle? I was like, I'd absolutely love to join your huddle. I'd love to hear more about what other collaborative leaders around the world are doing. So I'm honored and excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, then let's jump in. As everybody knows with the huddle, we're about practical tips, tools, techniques that we can develop and advance and scale collaborative leadership in an inspired fashion. So we're going to jump right in. Our big question for this huddle, in this time of uncertainty, in this time of volatility, in this time of increased constraints, we can't get together. We know that the economy is going to make things more difficult. Collaborative leadership's never been more important. And now during this time, and we can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel yet, we're kind of figuring out how far away is this before we get to a pattern again, a new normal, as they say. In the meantime, how do you build resilient teams? Jeff, let's start with you. How do we build resilient teams?
So I think there's 4 key points that I think are important on for building a resilient team. And I think the first one for me is, does the team have trust, and do they have psychological safety? And that sounds like a big term maybe, but it's one that's out there, and I really think it's an important one, the whole idea of psychological safety. Do I feel as a team member that I can speak up and say whatever is on my mind and feel like the team's going to be there, that they support me, whether they think it's a wacky idea or a crazy idea or something, that I feel comfortable being able to say that and get that out there? That's really important in a team, and that's extremely important when you're trying to build a resilient team, because in adverse situations especially, you want to be able to have a team that does actually trust each other and feels like each other has their back.
That's why I want to drill down on the psychological safety here for a moment, because I concur, I share the same perspective. I saw some research before the pandemic. 43% of employees in global organizations had never met teammates in person. They were already working remotely. And so what are 1 or 2 tips or ideas? How do you in your organization, and how do you encourage others to develop psychological safety in a remote setting? How do we do that?
So I think some of the ways that you try to do that, I think that are important, especially if the team doesn't have the opportunity to be together face to face. But even if they do, actually, it's being able to share something about yourselves, having a chance to share something personal that's going on, being able to be authentic about who you are. Let's take this as an example, right where we are right now. Many of us are in the shelter in place position. We've got kids at home that, kids aren't in school anymore. We're trying to be parents, we're trying to work, we're trying to find places in the house where we can work. That is all an additional stressor that comes into every interaction that you're having. and being able to actually just have a minute or two to let the group be able to say, hey, here's where I'm at. These are the challenges I'm up against. These are the things I'm struggling with personally even, can help build a connection, whether you're remote or whether you're face-to-face. You want to try to build in some time for a connection. And I'm not talking about taking hours to do that, but just a couple of minutes to be able to understand where are people at today, right now, in the moment that we're working through.
Awesome. I'm going to come to Kyle here and ask him to either respond to that or offer a question. And again, a reminder to everyone, if you've got questions for Jeff, please put those in the chat space. I'm going to come back to you, Jeff, with one more. One of the things that I've found has been really useful is during this time, it's important for us to be overt as collaborative leaders. We like to call it a platform statement and say, rather than getting right to the numbers we need to review, I'd like just to spend a few minutes at developing the psychological safety, the emotional safety within our team. And so let's take a few minutes by sharing perhaps something we're learning as we work at home, something we're discovering with loved ones, whatever it might be. Of course, we have to have the context for our team, but I always encourage leaders to be overt and really clear about why they're asking their teammates to do such things. Kyle, question or thought for Jeff?
Yeah, I do. And then just to remind everyone, any questions that you have, just go ahead and put them into the chat function and I'll pull those into the conversation. I have one statement and then a question for Jeff, but the thing that I've noticed during the conversations that, Craig, we've had with other leaders is you have different responses and different engagement from different team members. So you have people that go, okay, this is what it is. Here's the objective. How do we move forward? And then you have others that withdraw. It seems like an innate default. So how do leaders really, knowing that there's different personality types, knowing that people lean in differently with different times, how do you help engage, especially Jeff, knowing what you know about personality types, how do we best engage with those that don't necessarily find it easy to step into hard times or step into hard conversations? How can we help them in this time get a little bit more comfort to be able to be part of a collaborative team?
Well, I think one of the things that you hit on is this is whether we're in hard times or not, this is where personality preferences come into play. And I think especially if you've got understanding the personality preferences on your team is a huge step forward. So if you've got people on your team that have a preference for introversion, for example, they're going to want some processing time regardless of what the situation is. And I think being able to be aware of that, but then also bringing them into the conversation and maybe saying, hey, Kyle, I really want to get your perspective on it. I think you probably want a few more minutes to think about that, but let me circle back with you. Let them know that you want their input, that you want them to be part of the conversation. If you don't do that, you're probably not likely to get their interaction at that time. It may be something that they go away with, and it may be something that they even say, hey, you know what, I need some more time to think about that. I really want to try to process this a little bit more. Honor that and encourage that and say, you know what, oh, great, I want to give you that time, and I really want to hear what it is that what your thinking is. And maybe it's something that you circle back a little bit later in the meeting, or if they say it's something they need more time outside of the meeting, honor it. I think that's one of the most important things. But it is important to bring them in and help them feel like, make sure that they feel like, let me word it that way, make sure that they feel like that you value them on the team and you value what they bring to the team.
Awesome. I've got to follow up with this might be relevant. As a facilitator, and a lot of the work that we've done face-to-face with our client partners around the world, as you move to a virtual setting, in our training, one of the first things they give us as instructors is get comfortable with silence. Because in the video format, in the remote format, there's going to be my words, a clunkiness, sort of this dead space. And I got to tell you, as a leader, when we're face-to-face, it's got to go, 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 go. And I'm wondering if as leaders, as collaborative leaders, we can be, again, I'm going to be using that word, overt, purposeful, intentional, and actually encourage ourselves and remind ourselves that silence is valuable, and allow those introverts to have that processing time. Jeff, got another follow-up question for you. I'm going to practice vulnerability in front of our Collaborative Leaders Network here. I am identified. My type is an INFJ, So there you go. Now the world knows. My question for you, I'm really quite curious about this, and because these huddles are unscripted and live and raw, here we go. Let's find out. Are there certain personality types that are more prone to resiliency than not? Depending on our types, are we going to be more resilient in these uncertain, volatile times? Really curious to know. Please give me an answer that I'll love.
You know, I think all of the personality types can be resilient, and I think all of the personality types can struggle with it. And it really depends. And this is where I think the teaming becomes so important, right? This is where, if there's trust, if there's psychological safety, if the team knows what's expected of them, if they know what their roles are, if they know what they're supposed to be doing, I think all of the personality types can be resilient. If they don't, and if they're struggling with that, and if they don't feel that there's trust on the team, I think any personality type is going to struggle with being resilient on that team. And I think the team itself is going to really struggle with that. And when you think about it, in terms of what are the things that when you've had interactions with people.
Sounds like we've lost a connection with you, Jeff, for just a moment. There, you're back. Go ahead and finish that last statement for us, Jeff. I want to hear what you have to say.
Where did you lose me?
Just in that last sentence.
Okay. What I was getting at is that for when you don't have trust, I was just saying, think about how much time you spend on writing an email to someone where there isn't 100% trust. How much time you spend crafting words because you're afraid that, is this going to somehow come back to bite me? That kills resilience. That really makes a team struggle. And that's why I think for any of the personality types, if you're in a team like that, you're going to struggle. And so I think, answer to your question, I think all of the personality types can be resilient. And it really depends on taking the time to build the team to have the trust and that psychological safety that I talked about across the board.
Awesome. Kyle, I'm going to come to you here in a moment for a question. Jeff's words inspire me in the sense that I happen to live in Colorado. When you're hiking mountains in Colorado, it's about conserving calories. And boy, you're right. If we do not trust each other, if we don't have the affinity for one another, if we're functioning from destructive biases, then I've got to use more calories, which is going to break down my ability to be more resilient in the harsh conditions as we get towards the top of mountains. And so collaborative leaders, I know several of them on this huddle today, understand the power of living from our values and making those values a reality. Kyle, let's come to you. Questions from our network and/or a question from you.
Yeah, I think that answered Mona Lisa's question perfectly, but I want to go over to Derek Benson because he had a really good question, but I want him to say it in his words. So Derek, would you go ahead and restate your question for everyone in context of that question so we can hopefully go back to Jeff and get a good answer for you.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Hi, everyone. I'm Derek Benson. Just started working with Veris Global and some recent partnerships. So excited to be here and be invited. So thank you. So one of the questions we do a lot of research in my area around resiliency, agility, those types of things. And certainly, I think you're right with the concept of focusing on the people, and being resilient as leaders. My question specifically was, given, Jeff and your team, your work with the personality type indicators around the MBTI tools set, how can we use that tool set in a time like this or a crisis time in general, to be able to classify folks? They may be classified a certain way, based on a prior assessment, but how can we leverage that information to really address any limitations they may have or flexing they may need to do to become resilient, to be empathetic to their, to their organization in a time like, especially in a crisis situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Derek. I think one of the things the things that we would encourage is around understanding the different personality types that are on your team. And that's where I think it's really valuable when people do know their personality types. I like to view it as the gifts that you bring, right? So understanding what are the gifts that you bring, and more importantly, understanding the gifts that others bring to the table by their personality type, their different personality types. And I think through that understanding of those differences, we get a better appreciation for the other people on our team. So, for example, I give you an example. If I didn't know about personality type, my personality preferences are ENTP. And so I'm great. I enjoy the whole discussions about different ideas and generating ideas and all of this. When I'm on a team with people that have a preference for judging and they want to come to a decision and get something, say, hey, okay, we've talked about this enough. I want to get to a decision. I might view that without understanding the gifts that they're bringing by helping us get to a decision. I might view that as saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm not ready to make a decision yet. I don't want to talk. I still want to throw out ideas here. I still want to talk about ideas. You need to appreciate that gift of somebody saying, okay, we've got enough ideas here. We now need to get to action. Let's move to action. And looking at that as a gift, not as something that, geez, Derek's doing that just to annoy me, that kind of thing. And I think that's where we see the value of understanding the personality preferences on a team, and really, as I say, appreciating the gifts that each of the personality preferences bring.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jeff.
Derek, thanks for that question. Kyle, we're going to come back to you. Keep getting questions from the network. A practical tip for all of us as collaborative leaders: if I'm with a team where the word gifts, what are the gifts each of us bring, is too soft. Maybe I've got some folks that we don't have the relationships, that word wouldn't sit. Then we can simply ask a different question. What are the strengths that each one of us brings that's going to ensure we deliver on this project, we hit our milestones? And if strengths is too odd, I could simply say, hey, what are the capabilities, unique capabilities each one of us brings? Again, as collaborative leaders, our responsibility to fill that space and call us all to a higher level, build that awareness muscle, if we will. Again, Derek, thanks for the question. Jeff, let's come back to you with another answer. Kyle, questions from the network.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Denise to ask hers here in 1 second. I'm gonna tie in. Kyle Morris had a great observation about being overexpressive in your movements and hand gestures. This is for you, Kyle. But especially when you're not with somebody in person, being able to really, I think, because we lose that physical closeness, right? We lose those nonverbals. So to be able to actually see what it is that we're thinking and saying, that's a really interesting way to be able to connect with people, because people have a hard time connecting anyway, especially when we're virtual, especially in a time like this, whenever fear levels increase. So being able to do exactly that, to show the expression with your nonverbals. I want to ask that question back to Jeff, not knowing obviously the personality types as well as you do, but is that an important thing, especially when you're expressing yourself, interacting with people, to build trust using those nonverbals? And then that will lead really well into the next question from Denise Lebray.
So let me make sure I got the question right, Kyle. What you're asking me about is it important for people who feel that they need to use hand gestures and be expressive to have the outlet to be able to do that? Is that what you're asking me?
Sorry, let me shorten my 4-minute question down.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
Basically, how important is it now, especially being virtual, to use nonverbals to help build that trust, to help elevate the connection within the different type of personalities?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important. I do think that's even more important now. I think, we're fortunate to have technology like Zoom, the format we're on right now, where we can actually have the video connection. I do think that it's challenging when it's just a phone call and you're only going off of the voice. You don't have the nonverbals. Voice is a little bit better than not having that, and trying to do it off of email and whatnot makes it even more challenging. I do think that we long for that connection, especially when we can't have it. I think in this shelter-in-place environment, it's hard. And I grown to really appreciate being able to be on a video call where I can actually see another person, doing the virtual happy hours, or we do a weekly coffee break just to bring the company together. And anybody who wants to join, we just bring everybody together and say, okay, let's chat about something. And last week I said, what are you binge watching during the shelter in place, just to kind of get a conversation going.
Great
So
question.
I like the connection.
Perfect. Well, Denise, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question for us? Let's see, Denise Lebray. All right. Well, I'm going to go over then to Jonathan Komen, because his question is similar, so it's about trust. So Jonathan, do you want to share that real quick?
Yeah, thanks. I've worked remotely with my team for a long time right now. So in this world where our volumes are off 80%, so what's happening is discussions are being had about their future, and I feel kind of like a fraud because they want to know their future, but I can't tell them what it will be. And so I feel like I'm trying to encourage them. Our company's made an investment to keep everybody whole, trying to keep them happy. But behind that, I know I'm making decisions or having to make decisions that are going to impact a lot of people's futures. And I kind of feel like I'm losing trust, but no one said that. So how do you maintain that trust, knowing in your head you're making decisions about their future that I feel like I'm letting them down by encouraging them, keeping them happy, and all that stuff. So that's my question, thought.
And I think that, did you want me to answer that one, Craig?
Jeff, yeah.
So I think that is a great question. And I think so many collaborative leaders are dealing with exactly the same thing. It is really tough. And I just want to recognize that it is really tough. I think the things that we need to do is just be as transparent as you can about what's going on in the company. Let people know, hey, this is how much we're off. This is what we're struggling with. You know, people are smart enough to be able to put all of that together, and they're able to see, hey, you know, this is going to impact me. This is going to impact our organization, and this might impact me personally. I think that we have to respect that people will be able to understand that, and we just have to be authentic is what I would say. Be authentic and transparent. Be as transparent as you can. Obviously, you can't get into saying, you know, these are the people that are going to be going. These are the people that aren't going to be going until you're at a point where you're ready to pull, you know, ready to take action on that. But it is a challenge, but I do think try to just find ways where you can be as transparent as possible to help people at least connect the dots that this is really serious. And I'm not sure how many of us are going to be able to pull out of this together.
Jeff, yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that response. And I'd like to even add to that, if I may. By the way, Jonathan is one of the CEOs within the Red Cross organization, which for Jonathan to model vulnerability like that gives me reassurance that our country's in good hands with several of our nonprofits. And Jonathan, you call us to a higher level. That authenticity being so important, I'd like to add to it, if I may, that while we're in this uncertain time and this uncertainty reigns, if you will, we can still be really clear. And Jonathan, I know you well enough. Clarity in 3 specific areas. Clarity of our purpose, clarity of our imperative right now. What is it we need to deliver right now? Clarity of connecting to one another. Clarity of the value that each one of us have value, and being intentional about building that community, because as human beings, that gives us meaning. And then number 3, clarity of our values. I mean, you look back in history, and those that have moved through crises, if you look back and you study them, there's clarity in those 3 specific areas. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And like Jeff said, I love that, Jeff. Just saying it, because wow, if I'm working for somebody and they say, hey, I know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, then I'm going to start to be skeptical. And so I love your comment, Jeff, about being authentic about that, and then identifying where we do have clarity and focusing those areas. Jonathan Coleman, thank you for leading out there, buddy. Appreciate it. Kyle Shelley, another question from our network.
Yeah, Stephen, I'm going to get to you real quick because I think that was an interesting question. So will you ask that real quick and in just a snippet, because I'm not sure how many people are familiar with it, but I think there's a good tie-in.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I was just, first of all, hello everyone. I just wanted to say this is a great forum to talk about some very important topics as leaders that we're all trying to navigate through. So really have learned a lot the last couple of meetings just from listening to the dialogue and participating. Specific to the personalities, so on my team, I work for Johnson & Johnson. I'm a sales leader for dermatology for a national team. And one of the engagements we recently had was a LIFO survey, L-I-F-O. And I think it's very important to the discussion that we're having, because it really takes the personalities of individuals and what's your most preferred and least preferred personality. And it really allows you to understand not only yourself, but the teams and colleagues that you work with, of how can you operate with them in their most preferred and least preferred personality. So it's a really good assessment that can be taken that can help us interact and engage our colleagues even more effectively.
Cool.
Cool. Which for me then begs the question, Jeff, with different assessments, and of course Myers-Briggs, well known to many, what do you have in response to Stephen's question or thoughts and ideas there? And what guidance do you have for us, building on Stephen's comments there as it relates to, I'm going to say least preferred, most preferred, and that understanding, building on his comments. Do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things when I had mentioned gifts, you called them strengths. It's also understanding, and that's where I think the whole idea of being able to understand more about us as individuals from the personality preferences perspective is really helpful. What are the things that we have this we use these things called the type heads, and it lists out each of the 16 personality types, and it gives you words or descriptors for each of the 16 personality types. And then we have that same kind of a chart, but you're turned on your head, and it's called your stressors. And you get to see what are the stressors for each of the different personality types. And I think that those are the things, understanding those differences, understanding what it is that I bring to the table, and also what are the things that actually cause me stress? What are the things that for my personality type that I find more challenging that maybe another personality type complements? So there you can start seeing how that can be valuable, and understanding that on a team, and being able to, again, see what are the strengths that I bring, what are the areas that I'm not so great in, and do I have other members of the team that are great in the areas I'm not so great in, and maybe struggle in areas where I'm better in. And that's what builds a really great team that does have, back to that whole psychological safety and trust, all of that. You can see where you can really build off of the strengths and the development areas for each of the personality types, regardless of what you're using to get there.
Yeah. Stephen, thank you for prompting that. And Jeff, God, it triggers. Am I the only one thinking about this, that we are moving into an era, and this pandemic is accelerating it, that we're moving into an era where we're moving from physical labor even more to emotional labor. I mean, the teams, to your point, Jeff, it's the teams that have the emotional moxie. It's the teams that can actually be more human with each other that are going to be more resilient. Right. And again, we're dedicated to practical tips. I think, and I advocate for, we as collaborative leaders, ask your teams that question. Ask your teams that question. Are we demonstrating the emotional labor, the emotional work that's going to demonstrate the resiliency we need to get through this? Yes or no? And then the more important question, what do we need to do to become even more emotionally fit to demonstrate this resiliency. Jeff, thanks for triggering that thought. Stephen, thank you for contributions. Kyle, let's come back to you.
Yeah, I think that there's really something that triggered right there is the importance of being leaders when we're on a screen like this. Clarity, right? Clarity and being specific with what it is that we're looking for. Because I don't think this time does anything besides exposes more people in terms of what their natural style is. Because there's nowhere to hide. You can't hide in the conference room. You can't hide in between where someone's just focused on speaking to the masses because they're looking at the individual square that you are in that moment. And there is no hiding. So I think it exposes people. Therefore, it causes a little bit more fear of the individual on the other side. So being very clear and being very specific when we over communicate as leaders, I just see that being such an important thing, Jeff. And maybe you could speak to that. But the clarity, the individual over communication, off the side, but the clarity when you're talking to the team.
More critical than ever. I couldn't agree with you more, Kyle. And I think it's, and frankly, I think it's harder. You know, I think it's harder for all of us. You know, even for myself, the reaching out to the team and reaching out to the individuals. You know, I started thinking, gosh, I'm spending all my time. That's all I'm doing is reaching out to people. I'm not getting, I'm not getting anything done. That's kind of, I start getting anxious about it. But you have to really dial that back as a leader and say, no, this is what I need to be doing right now. I need to be making those connections because those connections are more important than ever. And to the gentleman, I think it was Jonathan that asked the question about people. I feel like I'm going to be letting people down because of what we're going to have to do in the organization. All the more we need to be communicating with people. And I think even when we have to make really tough decisions, and I know so many of us as leaders are making some tremendously difficult decisions that we know are going to have negative impacts on people that we've worked with for years. And the one thing that we can do is we can treat them with dignity and respect throughout the process, whatever the outcome has to be. Remember dignity, remember respect, and help people. If we're going to have to transition someone out of the company, help them do it with dignity and respect. That's the one thing we could do. That's the one last thing that we can do for folks. And then if we can, help them on find their next great opportunity when we have those opportunities. So good. It's tough. It is really tough. And I think the whole shelter in place makes that even more difficult, as I say, but I think it's more important than ever.
Perfect. And then if I can, I want to go over to Trisha Rivers. I think she's a very insightful question in terms of
Trisha Rivers.
Yeah, since video isn't going away, I can't hear you, so I'm going to ask a question for you, Trisha. So she says, there is an adoption barrier there. Not all are comfortable with video, which can be a distraction to some. So my guess is the fact that people aren't comfortable with video and it's not going anywhere, it'll probably be more prevalent. How do we help our teams become more comfortable with this platform?
That's a great question. How do you help people become more comfortable with videos? I'm going to say probably. I would say probably don't. If people are if you're really not comfortable being on video, I'm going to say it's probably not a great idea to put them in that scenario. Or maybe maybe try it, maybe have them try it in small increments. Like if you're having a one-to-one meeting, say, hey, let's just do 5 minutes on video, just so you can kind of get used to it, see how it feels, play with it a little bit, kind of ease people into it, and see if they start actually saying, okay, I do see a benefit to being able to see the other person. I think at the end of the day, if someone's really against it and they find it really distracting, I'm going to say it's probably best not to force it, because you're not going to get that person at their best. You're going to get that person focusing on the fact that, hey, this is how I look on that video, rather than trying to answer or respond to the team's questions or give input when that's what you're really looking for.
Jeff Hayes, this is where we get to, of course, in a real discussion, which is what we're having, we have diversity of thought and different opinions, and we get to leverage that. I really want to recognize that. And of course, it's all situational. I also have a different perspective. I wrote a blog on this a few weeks ago that if someone, well, it starts for me with being a collaborative leader is reminding myself that we're not here for people's comfort. We're here for our fulfillment and getting out of our comfort zones. If I am as a leader prioritizing comfort over fulfillment, then I know that the business is susceptible to suffering from that. And so I advocate, and again, it's situational because I think, Jeff, your point's really important. I'm not going to do something that's detrimental or harmful to a person, obviously. But I'd also encourage that teammate to remind them that we have a corporate policy that they can't wear a bag over their head when we are in face-to-face meetings. And so because when we're in the office, we can't wear bags over our heads, let's put the video on. And because the fact of the matter is facial expressions are huge in the effectiveness in communication. So I'd also offer that perspective, and then I'd advocate for working one-on-one and asking those questions that you just outlined for us, Jeff. Okay, what are the steps we need to take so that you have this comfort, that the comfort you need to be fulfilling your responsibilities to the team and the business. So an additional perspective.
Actually, Craig, if I can, I think that is a really good perspective. The one thing I would say is, and maybe it's even giving the person tips on how to be on video and not get so wrapped up in the fact that you're on video. And maybe it's, understanding, like I'm on video right now, and the image I have is of me in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Different
You look
than
great,
when I'm actually in a meeting.
Man, you're killing it.
I can see myself coming back, so it's like I'm looking at that. But I also see I can just turn that off, and I think helping people just understand the technology and be able to say, hey, look, my whole point is you don't want people to get so focused on the fact that they're on video that they're not actually present and accounted for in the meeting. That's my point. But I think you're raising a really good one, because you also have to think about the rest of the team. And they might want to see that connection. They want to actually see me. So I think it's a really good point, and maybe it's more about giving them the tips and helping them understand how to be on video without being so self-conscious about it.
Yeah, cool.
Can I add one thing to that real quick? I think how many of us, I'd be interested to hear from the group, that this is just a learned skill. No one comes on, they're like, hey, video time. And they just start, it's such a learned thing. Just like, you have two moms, one gets lessons for the child to learn how to swim. The other one says, whoop, pushes them in the pool and they start swimming, right? And
which is what my mom did.
Right. Who didn't have that mom? But I think as we do this, the more that people, when it's new, none of us as we get older, I think too, want to be embarrassed. If we're on mute or we think the video is off and it's really on, and we get up and we're in our pajamas in the bottoms, we're like, oh no. But what things do we actually expect to happen right away? Or do we actually expect it to be like anything else that we've learned in life, which is just practice and giving people grace to step into that, since this is kind of the new norm? I wonder how much of this is just giving people the grace, regardless of personality type, just to step into it and being okay to look maybe not as professional as we're normally used to looking in a normal business setting.
Yeah. I think it's a valid point, Kyle, for sure. As we come back to the network for an additional question, I'm going to come with a question for you, Jeff. There's another element that I'm sensing within our client partners around the world is there's speed that's required. And it's almost as if there's two types of organizations right now. There's some organizations that they have to move faster to survive. They've got to change, whether it's even a business model, a strategy. And then you've got those that it's not survival, they're speeding up because they need to beat the competition to the new normal. Either place, I'm finding that nearly everybody is experiencing greater speed in the midst of this volatility, uncertainty, and these new working conditions. So coming back to the topic of resiliency, what thoughts do you have for us? It might be related to, you know, personality styles, preferences, or not. But what thoughts and guidance can you give us as it relates to managing this pace? Oh my gosh, I'm sitting in front of this computer longer than ever. I don't even have the luxury of a commute anymore. Coach us on this, managing this new pace.
Yeah. You know, I think getting back to the whole idea of the resilient team, you know, I hit on one of the things that I think are really important. I talked about the trust and the psychological safety. I think some of the other aspects that you want to have on a team, especially one that you need to have moving quickly, is, you know, making sure that the team feels like they can get the job done, making sure that everyone is clear on the roles and responsibilities that they have, and making sure that the team feels like, okay, we've got the right people on the team, we're going to be able to do this, and we're going to be able to get it done in this time frame. I think all of that becomes really critical. And I think the teams today, especially, they need to be able to handle change, because think about how much change is going on and how rapidly things are changing. You know, even over this whole pandemic, just think about from February to today, how our world has changed dramatically. Making sure that the team has the grit to actually be able to say, hey, look, we've got new information, we're going to need to pivot, we're going to need to move in this direction when we thought we were going in this direction. And getting the team to be able to do that quickly today more than ever, I think is critical.
You're saying something there that I think that it's almost at this point, the fundamentals, being really good, the fundamentals of role clarity. And again, I'm going to be using the word overt, being very purposeful on those fundamentals, such as role clarity and others that we know from our leadership practices, become really key. Kyle, we've got time for one more question from our network before we begin to wrap things up. Do you have one for us?
I do. I have a lot, but Anita Malone, I would love to hear your
Anita Malone.
I think it's perfect to wrap this up. So Anita.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Loud and clear.
Yes.
Yay, because I just gave those instructions. So I was like, okay, I gave the instructions. If it doesn't work, I'm in trouble. Going back because I did make a few comments. So a couple of things. One is I'm trying to work with, I'm a trainer for 34 folks within a new group in Alcon. And so there's a lot of uncertainty and you know, I really appreciate Jonathan's, you know, showing his vulnerability in the situation that he's in. That is also swimming in the minds of a lot of folks. And so I try to find the silver lining, and we have all had to upskill on virtual WebEx training. And I think everyone's starting to find a groove that we were all uncomfortable with. And the silver lining is the savings on T&E alone, just things that we can all do and really be forward thinking about. I'm not going to be resistant to upskilling. I'm going to look at this as the country starts opening up, there will be opportunities for us to really save the organization money on T&E. We don't always have to be face-to-face in some of the roles within the company. So I have been so inspired by others around me. I'm trying to inspire them. They're inspiring me at really being very open and sharing just ideas of how we can move forward beyond COVID and continue to save the organization on T&E, for example, moving forward, even when we're all back to what we think hopefully will be normal one day. Yeah. We're thinking we're not going to go back to just being normal and always feeling like we have to be face-to-face. And that has really been inspiring to me in such a challenging time. So I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Yeah. I need to thank you for offering that. And it's a reminder that builds resiliency. When we reflect, everybody in this network knows the power of gratitude, the power of understanding what we have as gifts. We'll come back to Jeff's words. And so I appreciate that, building resiliency by understanding what we're gaining from this experience. That becomes really critical. We're going to be wrapping things up here. We'll be finishing with hearing our insights in an instant. Before we do that, a couple of resources for you. I saw some of the chats, people asking questions around where can I get more information. Of course, at Veris Global, the Do Big Things book, available anywhere where you buy books. Our connected focused video cast is 5 minutes or less of discussions like this with practical tools. You can find it, of course, on YouTube and other places on our website at Veris Global. Of course, we'd love for you to join the conversation within LinkedIn. And there, if you're interested in different elements of the Myers-Briggs assessments, you can see the website at the bottom. Remarkable organization, definitely worth visiting their website and the resources that are available there. Strongly encourage you to do that. The Myers-Briggs Company, the MyersBriggsCompany.com. There are virtual teams. You can see it at the bottom. As well, I want to share with some excitement that employees were planning ahead. Our next guest 2 weeks from now is Michael Onischek, who's the president of Global Business and Innovation at Elcon. Very excited to have him join us. We'll be answering this big question in 2 weeks. How do you align cross-functional teams to deliver big objectives? Michael is certainly a leader that demonstrates the collaborative approach and the ability to do just that. So looking forward to that discussion 2 weeks from now. Please make sure you join us. And with that, let's come back and wrap things up. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. You perhaps have had some insights as well. If you'd like to share your insights in the chat space, we'd love to see that. What's perhaps the most important insight you had during our time together today? For now, though, Kyle, your insight in an instant.
Insight in an instant is the question that Anita had with the what's the silver lining and the retooling right now. Resiliency isn't built without having opposition, without having problems to overcome. And that's what we're doing. And as we move into this new world, everything that we're pushing through right now, everything that we're learning will catapult us out as just being more effective with our teams when we get to that new normal. And I think that is a beautiful thing, both knowing the personalities, but also just knowing that that's how human beings evolve in general. So that's my insight.
Terrific. Similar, my insight in an instant is this understanding of connectedness again, and Jeff, you brought it to the table quite eloquently. This understanding of being human, touched by the different comments of the network, and this understanding that this is a period where we get the opportunity to develop even more emotionally collectively, so we can be more resilient. And quite frankly, that's exciting. It's exciting because that emotional strength benefits us all in society, not just through this pandemic, but long term as well. Jeff, bring it home for us, your insight in an instant.
It was great. I actually had many insights here, but one of the things that I think is really important is that the whole topic of building that resilient team and making sure that that your teams are going to be resilient, because you particularly need that during adversity. And I think that right now with where we are in the world today, we're dealing with such change at such a rapid pace that we need to have teams that are able to handle that change, be innovative, and be able to say, hey, we're pivoting, we're moving on in this direction because that's what we need to do right now. I think that's critical. And I think that my final point is, these are really challenging times for a lot of organizations. As I said, treat your people with dignity and respect, regardless of the decisions, the tough decisions that we as leaders, collaborative leaders, have to make. I can't stress that enough.
Awesome. Jeff Hayes, thank you to you and your organization for being a force for good.
Thank you.
What a pleasure experiencing it firsthand. Thank you to the collaborative leaders in the Collaborative Leadership Network. You guys rock. Keep doing good things. Remember, leadership matters, but only teams deliver.